Good morning and welcome to the first discussion segment on nationalism and you. We are on independent television broadcasting live from Pappy Hill this morning, the 3rd of March 2022. And this morning we will be taking a look at the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I am your host, Ebenezer Oyetakin, and with me to take a look at this topic this morning is a professor of international relations and the head of the political science department, University of Abuja, Professor Sherif Gali Ibrahim. Professor Sherif Gali Ibrahim, and the characteristic of this program, I say to you, nationalism and you.
It is my responsibility and obligation to contribute in this particular nation-building process. And we cannot live as refugees and illegal migrants in other nations. And we cannot destroy this particular entity because we have no better place beyond this particular.
Thank you very much. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. The best I ever had here. Very well.
Thank you.
It is our duty and responsibility to build the nation that we aspire to live in. Very well. Russia and Ukraine conflict seems to take the world like unaware, as if in a lightning form. It just came to be.
Yeah.
What is your takes? What are the issues?
You see, there has been a kind of a rivalry between the West and the East. Scholars as well as political observers in international relations for long they have been learning about this particular rivalry, between the Western and Eastern Europe. And after the Second World War, this particular rivalry emanated, having the dualization of the global order and system into what is actually called bipolarism and the subsequent emergence of the Cold War. The defeat of Germany, the Nazi forces, which the Soviet forces, specifically the Red Army forces occupying Eastern Germany, and the Western allies occupying the western part of Germany, that actually brought about the division. They came together in order to fight Germany, during the Second World War. And after Operation Barbarossa, after the Nazis attacked the Soviets and killing more than 1 million lives, and the Soviets started marching, and without actually relenting until they reached to the eastern part of Germany. And I could remember that Nikita Khrushchev built the Berlin Wall, when some of his interests were not actually taken into cognizance. This apart, the rivalry continued. Proxy wars, supporting regimes, the other one supporting rebels, the other one supporting regimes. We've seen that in Latin America. We've seen that in Ethiopia, in Somalia. We've seen that in so many places between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. Now the creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization come on board. Apart from this, the subsequent funding of the Warsaw Pact, which went to the Soviet side. And the disintegration of the Soviet Union brought about the emergence of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization as the largest military organization in the world, not only in Europe, not to think of United States, but in the entire world. And the collapse of the Soviet Union marked the decimation of the Warsaw Pact also. So this rivalry continued, intimidation, after the Cold War, the emergence of the unipolar order, the war rhetorics, as well as, other variables attached in this particular rivalry. Now coming down to 1990s. In 1990s, NATO promised not to actually expand and eat eastward. Why? Because for the global peace and security to be maintained, knowing fully that the Soviet Russia is also a powerful state, you know, as well as still relevant within the framework of international politics. So now, this particular trend not to expand an inch eastward, but we've seen mostly the state within the Balkan region, for example, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, now going down to Poland, you know, all these particular states have been actually co-opted, you know, have been co-opted into the North Atlantic Treaty. Now down to Ukraine. The worry of Russia is that do not admit these particular entities into the NATO military alliance. Why, if you do this, that's going to serve as an aberration of the Russian national interest and security. And you remember that the core national interest of every state is its own security. So therefore, there is no state that will actually compromise with its national security. So the expansion of NATO to what Professor John Meishama of Chicago University called Russia's backyard, because Ukraine is like Russia's backyard. So which not even the United States of America will have actually allowed that. Why? Because if we go back to 1823, the Monroe Doctrine, you know, exclusively gave the United States of America the right to securitize itself against any further encroachment either by the European powers or any other power, not even the Soviet Union. So that neither Spain nor Portugal nor even Italy or any European power should be allowed, you know, to venture into Southern America, either create a military base or even acquire colony, you know, in Southern America, because the United States saw that as a threat to its own national security. So with this, we also considered and observed 1962 case of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Why? Because the United States of America installed and deposited some medium-range Jupiter missiles in Poland, in Austria. And cross-check, why did the United States of America do that? Because there was a kind of a boasting of nuclear power by Nikita Khrushchev that particular time. So the United States of America thought it should actually show Russia that the United States of America is powerful and it could not actually allow Russian Federation intimidating any power in the world. So they now installed those missiles in Poland and Austria and other parts of Europe. So in response to that, Russia also did the same. That was actually what brought about the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, because Russia also deployed missiles, you know, into Cuba in order to reciprocate, you know, this particular gesture of United States of America's missiles in Europe. So President Kennedy came to power and he was so furious, you know, about that particular trend. Why should Russia deploy missiles, you know, into Cuba, you know, presumably to attack or to intimidate the United States of America? Kennedy never welcomed that particular idea, and it was trying to give Russia ultimatum in order to withdraw those missiles. This is what? This is the case of American national security, which America never tried to compromise. And what happened then? The American policymakers became divided on how to deal with Russia in terms of the deployment of these particular missiles into Cuba. One group of the policymakers now suggested that let there be an unconditional attack on Russia. Why? Because Russia deployed missiles into Cuba, presumably to intimidate the security atmosphere of the United States of America. Some others say no, we shouldn't just immediately attack Russia. Let us go by the way we give an offer, withdraw your missiles, we're also going to withdraw ours. You know, so all these particular proposals were given. And Khrushchev discovered that it will be a kind of very serious war, and it was a dangerous situation that particular time. And he was being persuaded to actually withdraw with the assurance that the United States of America will not let her attack Cuba. and the assurances and guarantees given, to Russia. The United States of America will not actually touch Cuba, because that particular time the Castro spirit was there,
very hot that
sweeping the Latin American continent, and the people are accepting communism, or let me say socialism, in their own domain. So that is the American case. Now coming down to Russia, Crimea to be specific. Now Russia said, all right, we want a guarantee that this state within Eastern Europe shouldn't be admitted into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in order for the safety and security of Russia, because this is the core national interest. Diplomatic engagements, have been unfolding, but all experienced a total and a sheer fiasco. Why? Because there was no any agreement to which the West and United States of America could actually agree with the interests and proposals of Russia. So many diplomatic engagements, but all to no avail. And finally, Putin thought that he had been pushed to the wall. The only thing he could do for his own national security is to invade Ukraine. Invade Ukraine, demilitarize Ukraine, and thinking that by the inception of the invasion, something could be brought to the fore, to the table, negotiation could be offered, to Putin. And nothing has happened, and this is to show the European and American arrogance. The look, we are powerful, we don't need to actually come down and bend, for Russia. This is going to be a slap on our face. So why should we just accept Russia's proposals? Because Ukraine has the right to belong to wherever it wishes to, and without actually considering the security implications of what they were doing. So many policy makers, as well as political observers, commentators, even I myself, I'm of the view and believe that Russia did not actually cause this particular war, because the United States of America was pushing Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. The Europeans were issuing rhetorics, of allowing Ukraine to join the European Union as well as NATO. So,
Professor, let me take you on this. Many opinion molders have said that in actuality that this war was started by the United States and European Union when in 2014 an elected government of Ukraine, president of Ukraine, that was maintaining good neighborliness with Russia was overthrown. And the coup that overthrown him were said to have been sponsored by the West, which led to Russia annexing Crimea. Now, many people are now saying that Russia did not actually start this war. Looking at it critically, that the West started this war, Russia is only responding. Your opinion on this?
Yes, of course. If you look at the tussle, the push and pull syndrome, in the whole Ukrainian crisis, you understand that Lukashenko, for example, who was the then pro-Russian president of Ukraine, he was actually romancing more with Russia. Proposals were actually being tabled for Ukraine to have a kind of trade deal with European Union specifically. But in the long run, Lukashenko turned down that particular proposal and tried not to actually join the EU, in favor of Russia. So this brought about the international conspiracy that the Europeans and Americans continue to actually have on Ukraine and Russia, not until they actually mobilized for the impeachment of Yanukovych, 2014, so that through the Maidan revolution, which actually removed Lukashenko, in power. Then coming down to the subsequent elections, which brought Poroshenko, tried to go further, expand Ukrainian relationship with European allies as well as the United States of America, and who could not also take a lead, in the subsequent elections which Zelensky won. So with the coming of Zelensky always tried, to align with the West, So this particular, but prior to this, remember, immediately after the Maidan revolution, Putin decided to actually respond. And what was his response? To actually annex Crimea as well as the Donbas region, where we have Donetsk and Luhansk. And presently, Putin has actually recognized the sovereignty of these particular two regions, Luhansk and Donetsk. And the war, in particular, you can actually argue that Russia is just responding. Why? Because Russia has been pushed to the wall. This is the last resort, for Russia. Why? Because we have engaged diplomatically, we have submitted our proposals, not for Ukraine to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which will actually undermine the security of Russia. But all of them became oblivious of the strength and power of Russia, and they decided not to respect that particular dignity of Russia. And Zelensky, being so foolish, he actually continued to romance with the West European powers as well as United States of America, forgetting, the furious nature of Russia as well as the powerhouse of Russia, and for also being oblivious of what Russia could actually do. So now when Russia invaded Ukraine, the Americans began to watch, the Europeans began to watch, and Zelensky himself, argued that they have been left alone fighting the war. So sanctions, for example, imposing sanctions on Russia, we are seeing the difficulty of the sanctions, but in the long run, Russia will be affected, we know, severely, but of course, Putin wouldn't have actually cancelled out this particular imposition of sanctions, and he was ready to embrace them and to accept them. But the major implication is that Russia will not feel the impact and implication alone. Why? Because today, since 2014, we are seeing the rise in the prices of oil and gas in Europe. Why? Because from $60-something now per barrel of crude oil is now $113 US. And this is going to affect Europe, this is going to affect the United States of America, even though there is preparation, to unleash the American oil reserves so that to actually deal with the situation of the rising nature of prices, but that will actually continue.
Many people have the fear that now that Putin has taken this bold step to say enough is enough of this NATO reckless expansionism, the way they put it, that he is not going to stop with Ukraine alone. And one will recollect that around 2008, he also took on Georgia, on the state of Georgia, and the rest of it, because that one was in a reckless romance with the West and things of that nature. So no other person than even Donald Trump's alluded to this fact that Putin isn't going to stop any longer. He will make sure that he severe every arms that threatens Russians' security. You share this view?
Yeah, we have two variables here. Russia will not just go and invade those particular states in Eastern Europe without agreement. What kind of agreement do I mean here? If agreement fails, between the East and the West, not to actually co-opt this particular state into NATO, and they continue to expand, then Putin will be left with no option other than to invade those particular states, in Eastern Europe, and even annex them and make them part of the, Russian Federation, or just could actually deploy puppet regimes, in those particular areas. And another issue is that if the West, as well as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, will continue to have an agreement with Russia not to actually accommodate this particular state, under the umbrella of NATO, then there is going to be peace and stability. But again, one major issue is that not only those states in Eastern Europe that have not yet joined NATO, even NATO members, Putin could actually invade if there is a provocation, to that. The promise made by Putin that any interference could actually meet fury and fire, and he made it. And I believe in Putin because he said that the American and European power, could not actually equal Russian power, meaning he believes that they can be more powerful combined, the two combined. But in terms of a war, there is not going to be winner. Why? Because it is going to be a nuclear war. And a nuclear war...
And that we don't want.
Yes, of course. But Putin is ready to do the worst as we speak now. Why? Because he has been pushed to the wall. When diplomacy fails, definitely you expect war. And if Putin should allow them conventional warfare engage, definitely that is going to be a big blow, to Russia. Why? Because imagine the 30 members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as well as the United States of America, sending all bombers, across Russia, even though the air defense system, and other military equipment.
In your view, is this war avoidable?
It should have been avoided, of course. It was, very clearly avoidable. Why? Because it's just a matter, give me a guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO. And the guarantee was not there. You keep pushing. United States of America continued with the rhetoric that Ukraine has the right to belong to where it so wishes. So Putin says, look, our interest has been abandoned. Our interest has been ignored. Then they left him with this particular option of invasion. So this is what we are saying. But there are two things I want to mention here. That we are really in a dangerous situation. Because after Ukraine, what else? Because the bombardment of the cities, Kharkiv, Kiev, we're also seeing Kherson has been taken over. Odessa is about to be also attacked. So if this particular bombardment continues, there might be a move by 1, 2, or 3 or the entire members of NATO to act on Russia. And when they try to do that, Putin will respond massively and aggressively. And that will actually attract nuclear warfare, in this particular conflict. Then let us assume theoretically that there is not going to be a kind of a physical attack, because no-fly zone is not going to be imposed by NATO. Boris Johnson of United Kingdom has said that. Even Joe Biden has said that. So if there's not going to be direct and explicit attack on Russia or Russian troops in Ukraine or even Russian bombers, then there is another issue. What is that issue? Let's assume that Putin successfully invade the whole of Ukraine, which is going to deal with guerrilla warfare, from the civilians in Ukraine, the resistance which Putin, must try to deal with. But the economic sanctions, if Russia is to actually feel the impact severely of this particular sanction, because Putin says we're not going to touch the international economy because we are also participants, we are members of the international economy. So, but this particular unilateral, imposition of sanctions by the Europeans and the Americans or Russia, if Russia thinks that the Russian economy will completely collapse, then there is another option. Putin might decide to make a blockade on this particular major trade route on the high seas, looking at the Black Sea, looking at the Mediterranean and other areas. He will make a blockade demanding for talks as well as consideration. Then look, if these sanctions will not be eliminated, will not be removed, then Russia will also act on that particular site and in that particular area. He will just make a sea blockade that those Europeans and even Americans will not have it. That will affect trade and global investment. Then, in this particular trend, United States, looking at this particular so-called freedom of navigation, as well as the Europeans, might try to touch Putin or Russian naval ships, which, if touched, then Russia will also respond. So we have so many flashpoints currently.
So the situation is dastardly.
Tense.
Now, let us go to lessons to be learned. The president of Ukraine, many people have referred to him as inexperienced comedian turned president. With his outcry that NATO and European Union promised me heavens and earth in forms of protection, and now we are abandoned alone. Wouldn't it have been better to embrace the concept of good neighborliness rather than depending on external forces using you to foment trouble with your neighbor? The lessons to be learned from here.
As a lawyer, Zelensky, also a comedian, I think I saw him to be an ignoramus. Why? Because by not looking at neutrality, that is why the Africans, I now try to help the Africans as well as other Asians who tried to sort and took a pathway. And what was that pathway? The non-aligned movement during the heydays of the Cold War. Not to be with the East, nor with the West. So they remain neutral and pursued foreign policy of neutrality in order to be safe. Then he has forgotten the trends of history. Why should Ukraine not to be neutral? I'm neither with the West, not to join EU, not to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and not to fully romance with Russia. That will actually give him the leverage to deal with trade issues and investment with the both parties. But he decided to go on one side. And another issue, this is going to be because Russia, Putin will not stop till he eliminates Zelensky. Elimination in the sense that it's either Zelensky leaves Ukraine or he dies in Ukraine. And that is why, remember, Muammar Gaddafi said he will not go anywhere. Libya was his land, and he was ready to die in his land. And Gaddafi was killed in Libya. So therefore, I think it is apparent the civilians in Ukraine, especially Kiev, are seeing, the danger they're engulfing themselves into. Given this particular arms, to stand before this particular major power, I think this is a mere mirage. They should. So it's either for Zelensky to leave Ukraine or he should be prepared to die. And if this happens,
are those arms being supplied to him? Are they for free, or they are being charged?
Well, these particular arms are a kind of a foreign aid from Europe, European Union, from Germany.
Will they not force him to pay for it thereafter if he survived?
That might be later. You get the point? Why? Because the issue of diplomacy
or mortgage its sovereignty
is mortgaging, because the great powers will not actually romance with you through the instrumentality of foreign aid, except if there is a motive. And what that motive could be for you to actually give that particular support to them. And if you look at the United Nations Special Section, the 11th, special section, emergency special section that took place within 2-3 days, you discover that 141 states, voted in favor of the resolution, i.e., for a special action to be taken, against this particular war, as well as isolation of Russia, as a punitive measure. But such resolutions, how many has Israel respected? There have been so many UN resolutions, on Palestine,
Russia,
Israel, nobody cares to take that.
China foreign ministers spokespersons was saying yesterday that we will continue to deal with Russia as normal because we do not support unilateral sanctions as being imposed by United States and European Union.
What China is after is not actually rivalry but competition. But I'm afraid that China must be drawn into the arena of rivalry. Why competition? China is competing economically with the world, with the United States, through its own economic expansion. It's like before you get anything you want, you have to expand economically, and China has successfully done that from, third largest economy, now second largest economy in the world. And by and large, China is an ally of Russia, not even learning from the Stalinist or Marxist socialist political system. We have so many things in common between China and Russia. And this is part, the two belong to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO, which Russia is a member, Kazakhstan is a member, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, these are all members. Pakistan is a member, India is a member. So this particular organization alone has the highest, membership among all other international organizations, because SCO,
could that be why the foreign ministers of Russia were saying that we have our own friends and they are reliable, so sanctions won't work on us?
Yes, of course. Why? Because let me tell you one thing. That issue is that only 35 abstain in this particular United Nations General Assembly resolution. 5 not in favor. They did not vote in favor of that particular resolution. So China, of course, will be in favor of Russia. Why? Because the position of China is that whatever it is, it should be resolved amicably. And whenever you call for resolution, either under the United Nations Security Council or United Nations General Assembly, Russia and China are in alliance.
So taking our time into consideration now, many people are concerned, Nigerians, they are concerned that the spiraling energy price and costs resultant from these conflicts, Nigeria will not be a strategic beneficiary because of our inability to refine our own fuel and things of that nature. Your takes on this?
Yeah, I have actually foreseen that. And because Nigeria is a member of OPEC, and OPEC has refused to actually increase production. So Saudi Arabia has its own political strategy in that particular area. So if the situation will continue like this, Nigeria will actually benefit. How is Nigeria going to benefit? Through the lens of history. During the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Arabs stopped selling their oil to Europeans and America. And this particular, people now turned to Nigeria buying oil. And Nigeria got a colossal amount of money that produced the oil boom, in Nigeria. Gowon was saying that the problem of Nigeria wasn't even money, but how to spend the money. So it's going to be like this because we are.
But those were the period that our refineries were functioning. Now that you sell.
Now we are not to sell a refined oil to the world. It is the crude. Okay, the raw crude. And the crude, now the price is actually hiking $113.
And it will go to 130.
Yes, of course. So Nigeria now will sell the crude exorbitantly, and that will actually give Nigeria a huge amount of money. But the issue is that Nigeria has a refinery deficit because we are also buying refined oil from outside. So what Nigeria should try to do, like the Dangote refinery, we should actually quickly deal with our refinery so that we continue refining in this particular period of time. Why? Because we have an advantage. We give the crude oil, we receive a huge amount of money, then let's make use of these available resources we have to actually revamp our refineries. By all means, not with the purpose of selling refined oil, no, but to deal with local and domestic consumption.
Are you satisfied with the response of the federal government of Nigeria to the extent of evacuation of Nigerians from Ukraine?
Not really satisfied, from inception. Why? Because when you heard that the Russians were evacuating their citizens from Ukraine, the Americans, the Europeans, the Indians, then you should have started doing that earlier than now. But the situation was just led because there was no actually intelligence, to have foreseen what was coming, because people abruptly saw the invasion, but Joe Biden has been repeatedly saying that in a matter of days or weeks, Putin will invade Ukraine. So that particular intelligence worked for the US. What about for us? Nothing worked for us in that particular area. We relied on other people's intelligence. Then when people became so locked up, in this particular crisis, then you are beginning to say, move to the borders of Poland, move to the borders of Romania. You go to the Nigeria embassy, is there to help you, accommodate you, shelter you, as well as give you food. What kind of thing is this? A preparation, because we deal with procrastination, too much. Even at home here, if you look at our appointment, dealing with party crisis, we procrastinate, we delay. And delay, people say is dangerous, it's not actually favorable. But today I learned that the first flight bringing Nigerians back will actually land in the country today. So that's a good development, and if our students and people in Ukraine will be duly evacuated and brought back home, for that. But remember, still some might not even try to come back. They rather stay in Europe, and see the end of this particular crisis, because Nigerians and other Africans even illegally left the country, for them to have a greener pasture in Europe. But this shouldn't be done. They should actually come down after their studies, or even now. Let's join hands in order to do.
If you are in a position to advise the world, what will you be saying to Russians, to the Western powers, to the NATO adventurism and all of them? Rounding up.
Well, my suggestion is that for the Europeans and Americans not to see themselves as the most powerful, because every people, is powerful in the world. Technology advancement is rather relative and subject to time and space, but each and every region is also powerful, either militarily, either educationally, either economically, even with raw materials and resources. Africa is very powerful, because if Africa should not actually give Europe and America its resources, they will actually experience what we call raw material deficit, which feed their own local industries in Europe. So what I'm saying here is that the rhetorics and that particular European and American arrogance should actually be avoided. They should actually come down and deal with other states within the framework of international politics equally. Let us deal with multilateralism, seeing other people equal and respecting all people equally. Not just to be selfish. You are only after the security of Europe under NATO. You are only after the security of United States of America under NATO. Without caring what happens to Russia, what happens to China, what happens to other powers, that do not belong to Europe and America. So this is my suggestion. But again, by and large, Putin is calling for negotiation with Ukraine. But I believe that before any meaningful thing happens, Putin will see the end of Ukraine, and that will determine the further international order as well as structuration of the international politics.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to Professor Sharif Ghali Ibrahim, Professor of International Relations, and we have not been disappointed as he laid the fact on the ground. And he is also the head of the Political Science Department, University of Abuja. It's been wonderful having you with us. Yes, let the world deal on the basis of mutual respect, mutual understanding, and mutual relationship, bilateral or multilateral, in order that we may be able to continue to engender peace in our world. Peace is better than war, no matter how we look at it. Don't change the channel, as we will be transiting into the second segment of the discourse on nationalism and you.